Hey guys, welcome to Thrive, the podcast from the John Good Group, looking at the good, bad and ugly of family business. Today we're joined by Gavin Howarth, Managing Director and owner of Howarths, the HR and law specialists. Today you're going to hear Gavin's story and how the succession came about between the passing of the business from his father to himself. I think you'll find Gavin incredibly thoughtful and reflective in terms of his own journey and just how the family unit moved through the process of succession. And I think there's some really interesting takeaways. So sit back, relax, and you will find Gavin and I talking about Gavin's favourite topic, LinkedIn, as we jump into the podcast. See you on the other side. I'm going to start, Gavin, with a very personal question. It's something I've always wanted to know.
Okay.
How are you as good on LinkedIn as you clearly are? I need to know the answer to this, and all the viewers and listeners will also want to know it. I've heard your staff call you Mr. LinkedIn. So come on, tell us the secret.
I don't know if I have a secret sauce, really.
Right.
I suppose I've been doing it 6-7 years. Made a lot of mistakes.
Right.
A lot of posts which I now read from 3 or 4 years ago and think, that is horrible.
Oh.
But yeah, like anything, you keep posting, keep iterating, keep learning. You start to figure out what works, and then LinkedIn changes the algorithm, and you have to think what works. But I try not to overcomplicate it and try and be as authentic as possible. I did a post a couple of years ago, which was about that. There's lots of tips and tricks and hints and strategies about how you can use LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Don't comment on your own posts. Post on a certain time of day. Like your own post. Don't like your own post. Put a selfie picture. Don't put a selfie picture. And those help. But at the end of the day, is the content half decent and interesting to read?
Yeah.
I just try to stick to that. And
so, how much time do you put into it?
Not that much. I have a file in my Outlook which is like a LinkedIn graveyard of all the posts that I've come up with, usually in the middle of the night or the night before, which I think are awesome at the time, and then I reread in the morning. No, that's terrible. Not that much. They just come to me, and often when I'm not trying. It's when you try and force an idea.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything.
But the engagement you get is through the roof. It's really, actually really impressive relatively. Have you found, so you mentioned being authentic, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But has that helped build business and just get the Howarth name out there? And
Definitely.
You know that for a fact?
100%.
Okay, so give me an example of how we know that.
So, many different ways. So, I've had people send me a message on LinkedIn, probably got 2 in the last 2 weeks, who have never liked or commented on any of my posts, so I don't recognise the name, who'll message me and say, I follow you on LinkedIn, really like your posts, we're looking for some HR, health and safety support, can I give you a call?
Amazing.
So that's happened quite a few times, but then more than that, a lot of what I post about is about culture, it's about people. So what I'm trying to do in a way is create an employer brand proposition online. I fling the doors open to Howarths, be as transparent as possible about who we are, what we stand for, what we believe in, the work we do, and create a queue of people outside the door that want to work here.
Yep.
And I probably get a message every 4 to 6 weeks from somebody saying, when you have a job opportunity, let me know.
Okay, so staff attraction as much as customer attraction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the outward facing bit. What does the team say about it all? And how comfortable are they with your full transparency?
I think in the main quite comfortable because we have a really good culture, really open. I do say to the team a lot though, because this goes back to the authenticity point. If you ever see a post on LinkedIn where I've got ahead of myself or it's not 100% true and verifiable in your opinion, just call me out.
Okay.
Like, say, Gav, that ain't,
Yeah.
So.
And how often does that happen?
Not happened. It's not, I know. It's not, but I'm trying to make sure that you don't kind of lose yourself in the whole game of LinkedIn and make sure it's still really authentic.
Yeah.
I must admit, getting the pictures are a bit tricky every now and then.
Okay.
Because no one likes the
Who wants the
photograph taken.
pictures?
I'm like wandering around the office. Anyone want a picture this morning? No, and everyone's head down. But in the main, no, really well. And I think there's also an angle of the team seeing a lot of my kind of inner thoughts, or I think there is a retention piece to it as well, and a sort of inadvertent communication piece with your own team, because they all see the posts.
Yep.
And it helps them, I think, as well.
Yeah. Embed
what we're all about.
And the culture that you've been building over the last few years has created a growing, successful business. So just give the audience a little flavour for how the business is today.
Yeah.
And then tell us the story.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, as of today, there are 34 of us, I think, in the business. We have 3 service areas: HR, what we call HR growth, employment law, health and safety, and we also do a little bit of business immigration work. Okay. And then we have our charity, the Howarths Foundation, which helps those who are at risk of homelessness or suffering from homelessness get back into employment. And my dad runs that, which I'm sure we'll come back onto. Yeah. We've been 20 years in business this year. Work with about 750 SME businesses, from those with 5 staff up to the biggest, maybe about 750 staff, anywhere in between. So that's the pen picture today. Where we started, 2003, my mum and dad, Andy and Helen, started the business. Very quick history was that my dad is from a one-parent council house in Leeds. Tough upbringing. Yeah. Did 30 years in the police, from 19 to 49. Okay. Had a good police career. Yeah. And retired at 49, 50. 49. Started the business at 50. Okay. Got his A-levels and law degree in the last 4 years of his police career. So went to college on a Tuesday and Thursday night for 4 years while he was still working. Got his A-levels.
So he knew he needed a second career, or wanted a second career?
Wanted, yeah. Okay. Wanted a second. Always had an interest in law. Yeah. Always had an interest in business. I think he would say that not always the opportunity to do it, particularly when he was younger and his background, etc. And then once you get kids, me and my brother, providing for children, etc., it becomes more difficult to sort of just jump ship. And but yeah, 50-year-old started the business. And what I'm most proud of, and I think what's most remarkable about Mum and Dad's story, so it started at home, in the living room, is that they had no previous business knowledge, no business contacts.
And what had your mum been doing up to that point?
Mum had part-time jobs in the post office, or she'd worked at the bank. Okay. Looked after me and Chris. Yeah. So Mum joined Dad, believed in the vision, helped him out particularly with all the numbers side of it, and they set off together. But nothing but one phone, one computer, no business contacts, no real business experience at 50.
Amazing.
Off they went.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really proud.
They're working out of their house.
Yeah.
Talk to me about those first couple of years in 2 ways. 1, the business journey, and 2, I'd be really interested to hear if you can remember back to what you were thinking during that period, watching your mum and dad do these things. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose my dad and mum, Helen, would be best place to give that first part of the story. But, I did work over a lot of summers in the business before I joined properly. As you know, as you do in a family business, it's a way of life, isn't it? And everyone's involved ultimately. But the early days were, I remember Mum having a little book, like I suppose, would you call it a ledger, with a line down the middle, money in, money out, 100 quid in, 20 quid out, and really, like, that's how it started. And what my dad used to do is rent an office, set a room, put on a seminar, and seminars weren't as prevalent then as they were now. Try fill the room with people, talk about employment law. If there's 20 people, then 5 might want a conversation afterwards, 2 or 3 might turn into clients, and do that again. And
and how old would you have been at that point?
Good question. So Would I have been 16? 1986
Okay, so
I was born.
yeah,
So.
teenager, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
were you tuned into what your parents were trying to achieve at that point, or were you they're trying to do something, but so what?
No, I was tuned in
Yeah.
because I can't remember the exact timing, but we'd been to Centre Parks on family holiday, and I don't know if this was just before Mum and Dad set up the business or just at the same time. And me and Dad had played, I think, badminton, desperately trying to beat each other like you do with the two stags. Gone for a beer afterwards in the bar, and Dad had talked about either we're just starting a business or thinking of starting a business. You know, would you be interested potentially, or what does it look and feel like to you? And immediately I was very interested straight away.
So literally from we're setting the business up, your dad, Andy, had in mind that at some point you might be in and around this business.
Yeah,
and
I think that's fair
like
to say.
Full in from day one.
Yeah.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So you really were invested in what's Mum and Dad doing and how's it going and all of these things early doors.
Yes, albeit because it was so much in its infancy, and I was always going to go off to university.
Yeah.
I did law at Leeds University, so who knows what would have happened. So the conversations were there, but you know, as you know, in business, it's very difficult. Who knows what's going to happen in the first 2 years? I go off and do law degree.
But your choice to do law degree, was that always in with the thinking that you might come back into the business, or were you going to go and do law regardless of what the family was doing?
I was going to go do it anyway. Okay. Like, I liked school.
Yeah.
I suppose somewhat academic. I did enjoy that, so I was going to do it anyway. Yeah. So I was tuned in, you're right, and we had some early conversations, but it were a little bit like, let's see how it goes, see how it pans out, go do my thing, you know.
Yeah. So you're off doing your thing.
Yeah.
Business is starting to grow.
Yeah.
Tell me where the next major milestone is in that story of the sort of company's growth and how you find your way back to the business.
Yeah, so the business continues to grow. Mum and Dad take on the first members of the team, which is, you know, a remarkable milestone, really. Just taking on your first member of staff is, as you know, that changes a business hugely. And,
and the pressure that comes with paying someone else's mortgage and all of those things besides.
Exactly that.
So when would this have been?
Oh, good question. I'm guessing now, but you could be looking at 2005, 6, 7 maybe, and around there. Yeah. And then they did move to aptly named Law Street, would you believe?
Okay.
Which is half a mile away
right.
from our family home. Rented an office there. And then, started to build the team out. Tracy, who is now our FD and 20% shareholder, joined in and around that time.
Okay.
She's been with the business like 17 years.
Wow.
So the business grew, developed, moved to rented premises, continued to bring on SMEs, help them with their HR and employment law for a fixed fee.
Yeah.
What I didn't say before is at the time, a new piece of employment law legislation had come out.
Okay.
So when my dad did his law degree, he'd spotted that a new piece of legislation was coming out, which was going to change the way people.
So that was the thing that he tuned in on.
That was
to give him that idea of there's an opportunity in the marketplace.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. So from academia, effectively, is where he spotted it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thought that SMEs are going to need help on this.
Yeah.
It's going to change the way that you do certain things.
Yeah.
And
so that's the entrepreneurial bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the business is growing. And where are you then? Where's your journey in parallel to this journey at Howarths? So Howarths he's got some employees now and everything else is going on. What have you been doing in that time? You got your degree?
Yeah, so I do my law degree. I then do my LPC, legal practice course, and then do a 2-year training contract at what was then Hammonds.
Okay.
But with all respect to Hammonds, it wasn't a guarantee at all that I was going to work at the family business. Hammonds were brilliant, and I loved that training contract, and I loved that whole journey. A brilliant organisation. It's now Squire Patton Boggs, a different company, but it wasn't a guarantee at all. So who knows again what would have happened? It were all very incremental, but I were off doing that thing.
So you were off building a career.
Yeah, to qualify as a solicitor.
Yeah. And had that first conversation your dad had on holiday in Centre Parks. Had that been a reoccurring during that period, or actually had it just gone quiet and you were left to go off and do your thing?
probably little conversations here and there. And I did do a little bit of work over summers as well and help out. So I was still in tune with it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I suppose you're just out of respect for mum and dad, and perhaps, without putting words in their mouth, the same from them to me.
Mm-hmm.
Try not to create a pressure or look too far into the future of what might happen. It was lots of respect for each other. Let's just take it incrementally, I think. Perhaps in hindsight, easy to say this, but I feel like this was the feeling between us.
Yeah.
Let's just see how it turns out and whether it's right at the time that it becomes a conversation.
Yeah. So talk to me about the time it did become a conversation.
Yeah, so during my training contract, I had a great, like I say, just to repeat, I had a great training contract. And we kept, we had a few conversations, and as that time went on, it became apparent that it could be an option. And just for me personally, the chance to work with my mum and dad and at least give it a go just always felt like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I didn't sort of sit for long and think, oh, could this work, or what are the risks? So I just instinctively felt I'd at least give this a go. And I'd love to work with mum and dad. We've always been really close as a family as well. So as the training contract went on...
so you're now fully qualified?
Yeah, well, I become qualified at the end of my training contract, but before you get to that point, you have to sort of, a decent amount in advance, start to say what you'd like to qualify into.
Okay.
The interview process starts in a big law firm of which department you might like.
Yeah.
So early enough in that, I sort of said to the business, look, I'm not going to apply for a particular seat, because also with respect to the other trainees,
there's other people
it's very
that want those
competitive,
same
and
seats. Yeah.
So look, I'm not going to apply, and would leave the business. And it wasn't easy, because in some respects, although having said, that I instinctively felt it would be right, but I was still leaving what is now and what was then like a national global law firm.
Yeah.
A brilliant firm, had a great training, I'd made some brilliant relationships. I did get some advice from some people in the organisation that were like, it's quite early. Like, even if you do want to do it at some point in the future, would you not be better?
Well, it's funny, because that's what strikes me straight away.
Yeah.
It feels really early to be making a call like that, with all of the opportunity and experience that some of those bigger businesses bring.
Yeah.
Now, you're going to say that you never look, but you don't regret it, and I understand all the reasons for that.
Yeah.
But, you made the move into Howarths, and we'll talk about that shortly. But do you think having more experience, looking at that period now, having another couple of years' experience might have helped you in your transition into Howarths? Or was actually, it was just the right thing?
I think it was just the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think some context as well is, my training contract started in 2008, which was the recession, global recession. And my first seat was corporate finance, which was quite a baptism of fire, really, because corporate finance, in normal circumstances, is a baptism of fire for a lawyer, I think, a trainee, or at least I felt like that. But then to do it in the biggest recession and global crisis we've had in a long time it gave it a very different feel, because there were conversations going on internally about staff, redundancies, restructures. So the culture, the atmosphere at times was difficult. So it just felt right for me. Yeah. In the circumstances. It was a risk, I suppose, looking back in hindsight, but I never really felt like that at the time.
But you don't, do you?
No, you don't.
No, you don't. So you've taken the step, you've told the guys, there's been different people telling you, some are positive, some are saying it's a bit early, whatever. So you take your first step into the family business. What position did you come in as when you came into the family business?
An employment law advisor.
Okay.
Effectively. Yeah. So I was advising SMEs on employment law.
So you came in a peer group of other people doing a similar job?
Yeah, one or two. We weren't of a huge size at that point, so And
how did it feel coming in as the owner's son, and then there's other people that have been here a while? Talk to me about those early days and how that all worked. Yeah,
I mean, I suppose it's quite a well-told story, that, isn't it? Because it is difficult coming in as the son. In some senses, should it be easier because your dad's the owner? I think he would say, and I would probably agree, maybe it was harder. Maybe he was harder as well, and maybe I was harder on myself to prove to everyone that in my own right I am actually worth the position, not just because I'm the son of the owner.
And did that need to prove yourself? Did that manifest itself in any things that, looking back now, you go, well, I'd actually have probably done that a bit different. I could have been more relaxed here. I would have maybe not done it like that. Is there any instances that come to mind?
Yes, so many. It's like, which one? Yeah, I think so. You do just make a lot of mistakes, don't you? If you're trying to push the business forward, push yourself forward, grow, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I did, and I think...
Give me an example.
Yeah, good question. I'm thinking more, actually, when I became managing director, of quite a lot of mistakes I made then, probably, as opposed to back in those early days. I mean, that was 13 years ago now, but... probably trying to overprove myself to myself, to my dad, to the colleagues. Did that manifest itself in long hours? Were you more abrupt with people than you maybe would have been in hindsight? Were you always trying to put your hand up to take every job on? Yeah,
probably
that. Actually, that last one's a good example of trying to do everything and be all things to all people.
Yeah.
But I suppose at 24 as well, giving myself a little bit of slack, looking back at my old self then. Or certainly I wasn't as adept at setting boundaries at that point, or knowing really what setting boundaries was, or being able to manage your life in that way. It was just do anything and everything.
You also don't have the experience at that point to really deal well with people. And you don't really understand what a 30-something's going through with kids, or what a 40-something's going through with something that's happening in their life. You don't have any of that, do you?
No.
So it's always back on that people bit at that age, because you think you can take over the world. You've just come in, son of the owner. Yeah. I'm going to prove myself.
Yeah.
And so looking back, you maybe pushed it a bit further than you... If you had to sit to someone else and there was another, owner's son in this room right now... What would that be advice for that period of time when they were coming into the business? What would you be offering to them as advice?
Good point. You just reminded me of something actually about the wanting to take over the world.
Okay.
I think when you're in your... Right, let me speak for myself rather than generalise. I'm confident, I'm ambitious, I've always wanted to achieve a lot and feel like I'm growing. And I think in your 20s, or in my 20s, when I was like that, I look back now and cringe slightly at what I was like then, of that ambition. And I probably pushed a little bit too hard, too quickly, for the next thing and pushing on. So an example of that was, this goes to when I became MD, which was 3 years after I joined, so I was 27. The first year I became MD, we had a good year. Mm-hmm. So we got to the end of that year, and I'm like, know what I'm doing here. Absolutely smashed it. Done one great year. Mum, Dad, you ready to sell out now? Or get me involved? I'm ready.
Okay.
Clearly ready.
Yeah.
1 year.
Yeah.
I look back now and you don't prove anything.
So you do 3 years to get to yourself to MD.
Yeah.
And then 1 year of MD.
1 year MD.
And now I need to be the owner.
Half decent year, and I'm like, right, I'm ready to, I'm an accomplished business person.
Yeah. So that was big faux pas with your parents.
Yeah.
Get that. Talk to me about the rest of the team, though, because we'll come on to the parent, the succession generation dynamic shortly. But how your experience from being the owner's son, you've proven yourself now to the point where your parents at least think you should be the MD. Yeah. So that must mean other people are starting to get the idea that you should be the MD.
Yeah.
So what's changed in that period between how you landed wanting to be the world's most ambitious person to now I'm the MD, and actually I need to think a little bit more broadly in terms of how to deal with people and staff and these things. So talk to me about that experience.
Well, I suppose I tried to do it very incrementally, respectfully, collaboratively, which is still very much my leadership style now. I'm not an authoritarian leader whatsoever. It is very collaborative. I do listen a lot to the team around me and take advice and take heed of people with more experience.
Yeah. Would they, the team you've got today, say that about you when you became MD? would they have felt that you were collaborative in all the things, or is that a learned thing?
I think they would.
Okay.
I think they would, because it is my natural style.
Yeah.
It's just my inclination to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they would. I don't look back at any part of that sort of managerial leadership bit and think I pretended I knew it all, or really harsh to people,
Mm-hmm.
or I wasn't really like that. In fact, I even think sometimes now I feel like an untypical leader. You know, if you look at culture as a whole and the likes of Alan Sugar and what we might regard as a hard business person,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not that.
Yeah.
So I never really. You'd have to ask them, I suppose, but I just wasn't like that.
Okay. So that's quite interesting then. So there's almost a Jekyll and Hyde dynamic here. So with the team, people focused, in tune, collaborative. With your parents, gimme, I need the shareholding, let's move this forward. Is that a fair summary of how that was?
I think when I was younger, in my 20s, I pushed a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that pushing was all with the parents rather than the wider business?
Yeah, probably,
Okay.
with mum and dad, but I just felt I had what it took to help the business grow and for us all to benefit as a result.
And you've proven it since, so it was there.
Yeah.
That impatience, was there anything looking back now that you would say to others that are waiting to take on the mantle from their parents potentially? Is there anything that you would do different looking back that would be good life lessons for people that are the next gen that will be taking on the ownership at some point?
Yeah.
What would they be?
I think, I don't mean this to sound trite or obvious, but they really are the most important things for me was patience,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, empathy, understanding. You're talking about someone's baby, aren't you? That they've blood, sweat and tears they've created, put their life into it. And to do a transition from one generation to the next, I think that second generation, despite how ready they may feel or ambitious, I think you just have to pay so much respect to the owners, if it's the parents,
Mm-hmm.
and be patient. But then again, at the same time as well, I think you also have to demonstrate that you are ready, because in our case, and again, not wanting to speak on behalf of Dad, he wouldn't have done the transaction. No chance would we have done the succession
Mm-hmm.
if he didn't 100% believe that I were ready.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't be too deferential, like in your attitude, because you have to be able to demonstrate you're ready for this, and you've got what it takes to run a business. And as you well know, running a business, you have to have a little bit of steel. You have to have an edge. So I think, your parents, in my case, my parents needed to see that as well, for them to say, well, actually, I do think he's ready.
Yeah.
He might tell me, but I also need to see it.
Yeah. How long was it between you ringing your parents up and saying, first good year's in the bag, time to sell, and the actual point of when that conversation properly started to happen, when you genuinely got into the conversation about making that purchase?
Well, that's a good question. Probably a good 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
And then the conversation itself would have been another 3 years.
Okay, we'll come to the conversation itself in a minute.
Yeah.
So, you've had your first good year as MD.
Yeah.
I'm the man.
Yeah.
It's taken you 4 years, to actually then have a proper conversation about moving this forward. Was that you starting to learn you needed to be more patient? Was that your parents saying, no, we're going to slow this down now and make sure he does demonstrate all of these skills that you need to have to feel comfortable to take it on? Who drove that pace? Because that's quite a long time to wait for an impatient person.
It's a bit of both. And of course, it has to be right. In our case, it has to be right for Dad as well.
Yeah.
I might say I'm ready. Dad might even see some seeds of me being ready.
Yeah.
But is he ready?
Yeah.
So, whilst there's certain things in your control that you can demonstrate and do, the world has to kind of be ready for that to happen as well. So, I think it was a bit of both. It was me understanding that as I got older, and so into my late 20s, early 30s, maybe you collect a little bit of wisdom on the way and realise, one good year don't make you an accomplished business person. let's prove it over a few years. You've got a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
A lot to learn. You're very green. Coupled with Dad also is going through a transition in his life as well, again, without speaking for him, about is he ready and what does he want to do next? And so there was a good period of overlap, transition.
So your dad's controlling the pace for all the reasons you've outlined. Completely understand that. And that's what happens in a lot of the family businesses. It's the person that's selling ultimately that dictates how that all's going to happen. You've been potentially impatient because you want it straight away. So how are you feeling? Frustrated? Are you accepting? Are you just quietly going about your business? Talk to me about the Gavin of that period and how he squares that circle, because that'll be the experience of lots of people taking it on.
Yeah.
So how are you, and how did you cope with that?
Yeah. A combination of grateful for the opportunity, loving the job, learning a lot. So that side of very trying to remain humble, learning a lot, and genuinely enjoying it. And as time went on, starting to understand I do have a lot to learn. So hold your horses. But yeah, you can't sort of sugarcoat it too much. To also periods of maybe frustration. Like, I'm ready to go. Can we move it on?
There any? Can you remember any particular triggers? So you know the pace now is that you control of your dad. Do you remember any of the triggers which really fired up the frustration? Things that you were like, this is obvious, we need to do this, and it wasn't going the way you wanted it.
Oh yeah. Specific examples within the business.
Something where you're like, I need to do this quickly now. This is driving me insane.
Yeah, I suppose there were moments because I suppose, let me see if I answer it this way by going back one. The other option to me becoming owner would be to be an MD, an employed MD, if you like. So mum and dad retain ownership and I be an MD, which many people may well say, absolutely great. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Collect a decent salary, earn money for the shareholders. So there were moments throughout that journey where I thought, is that right? Like, should I just... not just accept that, but should that be the right option? Should that be right? Am I asking too much, wanting too much? So yeah, there were periods of frustration at times. But
did you ever doubt that it would end, that it would happen?
Maybe once or twice.
Okay.
Maybe once or twice, but I think ultimately, Adam, overall, like, and I hope this comes across right, is love mum and dad to bits. We've got the closest relationship going, and I always said throughout, genuinely, and so did mum and dad, I would genuinely walk away rather than fall out with mum and dad. We had us frictions every now and then, of course. In the early days when me and dad were getting used to working together, the odd storming off doors, shut a door slightly too hard, cross words, but underneath it all, again, without wanting to sound too cheesy, was just a lot of love, a lot of respect, and yeah, genuinely, I'd have walked away because also, not sugarcoating that, I did feel like I could go get a career and earn an half decent salary and create a good life for myself without Howarths.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want to. I wanted to work with mum and dad. I wanted to create family succession. Like you rightly said, if you go back right to the conversation 20 years ago, Dad had always hoped he could build a business that would, be right for the family, for me and Chris and for us. So we always had the hope one day that we could achieve succession.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot of horror stories about family businesses, it's splitting, and I've posted sometimes about it on LinkedIn, or a lot. I used to do a few years ago. And I'd used to get messages from people that would say, so nice to read your story. I'm really pleased it went well for you and your family. It didn't for me. I haven't spoken to my father-in-law in 10 years, or I haven't spoken to my mum in 5 years, or we were just not going to let that happen.
Yeah.
Not going to let that happen.
So, I mean, it comes across really clear. It's core to what you want to do, the family wanted to do, and what the business was about.
Yeah.
So, you've gone through that, some roller coaster period.
Yeah.
And then Andy, your dad, right, I'm ready. You sit down. Talk me through that day, that conversation. How did that act? Was it a point in time, or again was it one of the just incremental things that just happened over months and months?
Incremental, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't remember a meeting which was that kind of, this is a point in time. It was more incremental conversations here and there that sort of built up slowly in momentum, in depth, where it started to become a little bit more serious. And yeah, actually, this could be something.
Can you remember a specific point where you're like, this is going to happen now?
No, I don't think so. But because I'd probably liken it to the way I told the story about mum and dad starting the business at home, me going off and doing my law degree, and us being very much like in the moment, let's just see what happens. Yeah. No pressure as such, or try and keep the pressure as low as possible. It is a pressurised conversation, but try and keep it as low as possible. A lot of love and compassion. Let's see what happens. If we can do it right, then great. If we don't, we still have our relationship. So,
was there anything on your dad's side that triggered that, right, this is the time? Was it a performance thing? Was it a family thing? Was there anything that was like, no, now is the right time?
I suppose you'd have to ask him. Part of him might be like, I'm sick of Gav talking to me about it. But also, I think, we had talked about setting up our own foundation.
Yeah.
So we'd wanted to do that as a family. This was 7, 8 years ago. Maybe even longer, actually, because the charity's been registered now for 6, 7 years as an official charity. Yeah. So we had that in our vision. So it became more apparent as we went on that actually Dad would like to run that.
Yeah.
Would like to give something back. A lot of experience and expertise that would be great for that. So as that progressed, it all just sort of fit into place.
That became his focus.
Yeah.
That meant he couldn't give the business the time that it needed. That made the opportunity for you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And as obviously I'd become MD quite a few years before, so we'd had a good period of learning the ropes, like me and Dad working quite collaboratively, then me taking more and more on, Dad taking less and less, but all very incremental time, because it's emotional. The whole thing is emotional because it's family. So the whole journey, everything is there's a lot of emotions wound up. You're not talking about someone who's at arm's length, a trade sale or someone you've never met before. It's all emotional. So what happens in the day goes into the night. What happens is, as business people, translates and transmutes into father-son relationship, into mother-son relationship. It's all very emotional and intertwined. And I think because that's the case, it needs to take time. Because, coming to terms with, for mum and dad, again, not wanting to put words in their mouth, but coming to terms with the business not being theirs anymore, that takes a long time. Like, that takes time, understandably so. And it should, and that's right, because you've got to get used to it. And also, what we didn't want to do, Adam, is do a deal, get all the paperwork signed, etc., and then there'd be anything left afterwards that was, I felt a bit rushed into that, or I don't know if I were ready for that, actually, now I've got you. Or any little shred of resentment or feeling that we shouldn't have done it. So if you want to achieve that emotional contract, if you will, then you need to give it the right amount of time.
And that for you guys was 3 or 4 years?
Yeah. Okay. 3, 4, I mean 5 years between the first conversation, the very first, and signing on the dotted line. Yeah.
But at that point you felt, well, it's going to be mine, so it doesn't matter how long it takes. Is that how you were feeling about it?
Yeah, I suppose a little bit. But again, I probably, hopefully, wasn't as presumptuous to ever think that. It was more just trying to be very much in the moment. Yes, hopefully it happens. I'd love it to happen. Mum and Dad as well would love it to happen. We'd like to achieve succession in a really cool way. But let's just take it week by week, month by month, year by year. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Let's just keep the conversation. Every bit of the conversation we were very invested in at that moment. And the way it kind of worked was we'd have a conversation about something, and then it might be 2 weeks before you have another conversation, because you needed 2 weeks of breathing space just to allow that conversation to relax, the dust to settle, for the emotions to settle about it.
So with such a strong family unit, as you've described, and you're having these slightly tense type conversations, the 2 weeks in between, would you go straight back to family mode when you're going to the football or messing around with the kids or whatever? Or was it slightly tense through that period because you're still family and you've had a tense conversation? Were you able to compartmentalise, or was it always hanging around?
No, I think we were, in the main, able to compartmentalise the conversation. Yeah, that was kind of... Look, Mum was really good on that.
Yeah, okay.
So, like, that's a work conversation, and this is home.
Okay.
So it was very like, you know, me and Dad might try and sneak off into the kitchen and have a quick conversation about work, but Mum would off and like, find us out and come on, you two. We're not talking about work.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about Leeds United. So we did manage to keep it very compartmentalised. And a big part of that, Adam, I think, is that I can't praise Dad and Mum enough for contextualising the importance of work. Mm-hmm. So we've all worked really hard as a family. We all do work really hard as a family. But it doesn't come above family. Mm-hmm. Dad's always been brilliant at that. So yes, he's an entrepreneur. He's a fantastic businessman. He always has been. But his heart's always been really big. Mm-hmm. And he's always said to me as I was growing up, you know, don't treat this job too seriously. You know, you got... Now, lovely wife at home, 2 great kids. And even now, today, is very much like that. So because we had a context of being able to set work in its rightful place in all the categories of what makes life successful, in our opinion, we were able to say, that's a work conversation. Yeah. Let's concentrate on what like matters today on a Sunday, which is the kids running around or Sunday lunch or Leeds United tours or whatever it might be. Yeah. So we did quite well in that respect.
Okay, that's interesting. So we've got to the point you've signed on the piece of paper. Was it a celebration? Was it a, right, we're off out? Was it a big deal here? Or was it actually business as normal because it's been that incremental build?
Bit of both. So business as normal in the business, I think, because I'd been MD for an amount of time, 8 years maybe before the deal. So to the team, hopefully it felt quite natural and easy because it's kind of been, you know, I've been running the business for a period of time. For us as a family, what was nice about the deal is we actually went back to Squire Patton Boggs. Okay. So I maintained quite a few good relationships. Yeah. So I was really pleased to be able to instruct where I did my training contract, the firm where I trained, to do the share purchase agreement for us.
Did you manage to tie in anybody that said, don't go, to do that
No,
work?
I didn't actually.
You should have definitely done that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you sat in their office, you're hoping some of the doubters are flirting around, they weren't, clearly.
Yeah, no, they weren't. Yeah. So we went back to their office, they'd moved office since then, so I have this lovely fancy building now, a glass room that looks over Leeds, and we'd all gone there. And Dad had a really good relationship with Paul Mann, who was the partner who did the deal with us as well. So we all trusted him as a family, which were brilliant. Yeah, and we all signed on the dotted line, and we did have a drink afterwards. We had champagne in the room itself. But I think it was a mix between, you know, excitement, a new era, some relief for everyone, I think, because the conversations, like you've referred to, are not easy. Yeah. I think as a family, it was a little bit, it's nice to get that done. Yeah. Because also, sort of what we haven't discussed is Dad had been diagnosed with cancer. Okay. In the middle of that journey. Okay. So one of the reasons why there was it took 5 years, I suppose, is because
everything went on hold.
Yeah, Dad became ill as well. So, so we'd been through a lot as a family together. So to get there was, a lovely moment that we've managed to achieve it, keep our relationships intact. Yeah. Excited for a new future, some relief. Yeah. I think we were tired on the day as well. Like, we'd signed the deal, we'd gone out for a meal afterwards. Yeah. Tracy was there as well, so it was lovely for Tracy. Yeah. Almost family, employee nearly number one or two. Tracy's shareholding went up as a result as well. We all went out for a meal afterwards, and then, we're like, let's go home and rest.
And talk to me, how did you feel the next time you walked through the door here? Did you feel different? Was it like, hold on a minute, oh, this has just got a bit real?
You can't deny there's a change in your feeling.
Okay.
There has to be, I think, because the book really stops with you now.
Yeah.
As part of the transaction, the charge from the bank moved to my house.
Okay.
So that feels a little bit different.
Yeah.
You now own the business in the majority, so it really does stop with you.
Yeah.
So it does feel a little bit different. There's no two ways about it. But again, because we'd done it at the timescale we had, I'd been MD for 8 years, it wasn't a huge shock. It wasn't a shock for the team internally. We'd been working up to it. It was business as normal for them, really.
Yeah.
For me, I felt a little bit different because, as I say, I now own it. There's things like the charge going on your house, etc.
A little bit of weight to carry now.
Yeah, a little bit more weight to carry, perhaps. But by then, I felt very comfortable with that. I was ready for that, and I didn't have a problem with it, really.
So, unlike in other businesses where a generation takes over and then it's all change because they've got this new vision and they want to do X, Y, and Z, was there any of that now you owned it, or was it just carry on the route we're going?
It was just quite smooth.
Nice.
Quite smooth because, as I say, because I'd been doing it for a few years before. Me and Dad also, whilst we're very different people and different styles, fundamentally are so tight on values and what we believe in for the business. So we didn't have that many clashes on the fundamentals of the business. We may have had ones about, do we need a new website? Do we need to... does the website need updating? Well, I don't think so. I do. Things like that. But fundamentally, the way we operate in business and the values of what we believe in, we've been such on a page about forever because we're so tight as a family that we didn't have any fundamental disputes. So the business took a path that I think we were both always very happy with. So when the transaction happened, it very much felt very natural. Yeah. It was a very natural transition.
Okay, so let's talk business. Let's switch tack a little bit. So, on the day you take over, what are you doing? I mean, you've got 3 divisions. There's maybe the sort of 3 focuses now. Yeah, and there's maybe the international bit as well. What was the business like then, and how have you got from where the business was when you took over to today?
Well, I think probably in my mind, what's more relevant is probably me maybe taking over as MD. As opposed to becoming owner. Okay,
so that's where all the change started.
I think so. That's where probably more market change, because the takeover was only 2 years ago. So, and we'd already been on a path. But becoming MD, we added health and safety as an offering, which we felt was complementary to what we already offered in the compliance arena. Yeah. We've then more latterly added HR growth team. Which is brilliant. So we did expand the service range.
How do you test for that innovation, or is it these things that you're doing and you realise actually customers are asking for it, we're sort of doing it, we need to separate out and invest, or do you do an innovation process beforehand to work out how you're going to do one of these new ideas?
The way we did it, putting it really simply on both the health and safety and the HR growth, is listen to the customers. Okay. So it became apparent to me that when we were offering the employment law compliance service, that you'd hear or come across in conversation that a client might use another provider for health and safety, or they needed some support on health and safety. You should only need to be asked 1 or 2 times before you start thinking, we should do this. Why aren't we doing it? So that happened there. The HR growth was, again, a similar thing. Like, clients would say, okay, thanks for the advice on a disciplinary hearing. I understand the advice and that really helps. I just don't actually want to do it. I don't want to actually do the hearing. Okay. I'd really like someone sat next to me or helping me. Qualifying as solicitors, that's not really a service that solicitors would give because, of privilege, and you're not trained to do that either. It's more a HR function. So, again, we only needed to be sort of asked 1 to 2 times before we thought, well...
So how do you encourage your team to be doing that listening? Because it's not an obvious skill to be listening for those triggers and then have the wherewithal and then the confidence to bring it to someone like you and say, we keep getting asked this. So how does that work here?
Culture.
Right.
Culture. I think innovation to me just means improvement. So I think sometimes the word innovation can feel some mystical, far outreach concept that's only the the remit of Tesla or companies that we think of as very advanced. But if you think of innovation just as improvement, I very much like the Japanese production model of Kaizen, the 1% improvement. Yeah. So think of it as improvement. How do we make incremental improvements every day, little improvements across the business? Now, yes, the board are responsible for that. I'm ultimately responsible for innovation in the business, but as you scale and as you know, it's very difficult for you to cover all areas. You become more and more off the coalface, and you need to build a team of people who want to improve. And now I think the way you do that is build a high-performance culture so that people feel psychologically safe enough, comfortable enough in their role, and invested enough in the mission and vision of the business to want to bring these ideas to people. And I think you only get a couple of bites at the cherry. Okay. Because if a member of staff, and you hear it a lot, goes to their manager, who as you scale become then their first line, and say, oh look, I think if we just had a little bit of paperwork at this point in the process where we got that bit of information, it'd make the process really good. And the manager say either doesn't reply, forgets to reply, doesn't give it the light of day, then you might get one more bite at the cherry before then the member of staff says to another member of staff, a new start or a new recruit, look, I won't bother saying out because they never listen anyway. I won't bother raising it. And there you cut off the line of innovation. So there's a big piece of work, I think, for the SME community to do to build a culture which is high performing, psychologically safe, full channels of communication that create and foster a culture of innovation. And without getting on too big a picture, did you see the Be the Business report recently that was released?
I don't think so.
So that talked about how out of the top G7 nations, the UK are 6th for productivity. So we've got a productivity problem. It's quite well documented in the UK that we've got a productivity problem. 5 of the suggested measures for improving productivity, 3 of those are around people. People things. Management and leadership is a huge part of improving productivity. And that example we've just talked about there, which is a very sort of on-the-ground, simple example of how things can turn out, is a problem for SME businesses and productivity and innovation, management, leadership, culture, high-performance cultures. So what we try to build here, everything we sell, if you like, particularly through our HR growth team, which is all about building high-performance cultures, is what we do here. That's why I really believe in it, and why we believe in it is because it's everything we try and do here. And it's a good reason, I would say, why over the last 8 years, Howarths has quadrupled in size and all the good metrics, because we build a high-performance culture.
Do you get external help to help with the team doing that? Because you got to foster that with your management team. So how does that work at Howarths?
No, so a lot of it we do internally. I mean, Tracy is HR qualified as well as being our FD. So HR sits on our board. I qualified as a solicitor, and I've learned a lot of Tracy and a lot of our HR growth team as well, and the HR professionals, and I love it. I'm all in for it, because I feel like HR for a long period of time, the people piece has been seen as a nice to have. And you can hear things in the SME market like, oh, what does HR do? They just add to the bottom line. They're always telling us what we can't do. A feeling of frustration, what do they add? And some of that is HR's problem in the way they communicate, but I think now in a post-COVID, post-Brexit world, this no longer is a nice to have. Call it HR, call it culture, call it engagement, high performance, whatever you want to call it, people. This is no longer a nice to have, and it's the difference between a business being here or not in the next 5 to 7 years. One of the biggest risks for businesses now is recruitment and retention of the best talent. So sorry, going back, I've gone off massive tangent there. To answer your question, we do a lot of it internally because we have our HR growth team. We have HR experts in the business. So, but we do use external resources as well where we feel like we've got gaps. So, But we concentrate very much in Howarths, and it's exactly what we sell outside of Howarths, and that's why we believe in it so much.
And that helps with that whole authentic piece which we started on.
Yeah.
You know, you live and breathe what you do, the open door that you've talked about, because that's what you do internally. You drive your business the same way you drive your customer's business.
Yeah.
It all helps that, right?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant. 3 last signature questions, short ones. So, first one, what do you dislike about being a business owner?
Oh, that's a good question. The obvious one would be to say, you know, the stress, the hours, but I can't say I dislike that probably. On occasion.
Yeah.
You know...
You can say the tax man if you want, Gavin, it's fine.
Yeah, go on then, tax man. What I try and guard against, I think, is my role as managing director becoming a part of my identity. You know, I think sometimes I feel like I need to check myself and make sure that, look, being a managing director is, I think, held in a certain amount of esteem in Western culture and society, isn't it? Oh, you run a business, you own a business. But the truth is, it's only one part of who we are. You know, being a father, being a husband, being a son, is arguably more important than that.
Yeah. So you dislike the association with your title?
I think I do. Yeah.
Okay. So is that because you don't feel comfortable?
Yeah, maybe. What, in my role, do you think?
Well, comfortable with the title.
I think the title, maybe, yeah. I think the title. I like leadership. I do like the idea of, you know, leadership, but yeah, maybe there's a little bit of uncomfortableness about the title, and I just don't want it to define me. You know, I feel like I'm more than that, and we're all more than that, aren't we? They're all more than our job.
Yeah.
But I think in this type of society, you know, ultra-capitalist, high-growth culture and society, it can sometimes feel there's a lot of a weight attached to that when really it
doesn't mean much.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so flip it around. What do you love about being a business owner?
The independence, the freedom to be creative, the freedom to build, the freedom to make change, the freedom to run a business where we stand for something and we mean something. That's really important, I think, and I love that about business, and particularly my role. Yeah, is the freedom to
drive those things.
To drive those things.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. If you could change one thing about the world of business, what would it be?
To have more heart, I think. I think the world, there's so many great SME businesses that are doing such good work. And I love the SME market. That's where we work. That's who our clients are. It's blood, sweat and tears. It's husbands and wives starting a business. It's friends. It's a brother and sister who go out on their own. I love the ingenuity of it, the innovation, the invention. I think there's so much good work. I do worry about the business world from a large corporation perspective. I think when we're driven so much on just profit maximisation, you know, the third of the UK working population is employed by big business. And when you consider their supply chain as well, it's actually their influence is much wider than that, much bigger than that. And these companies, you know, are so focused on profit maximisation, shareholder return, etc., that I worry about where it takes us as a business community. And I feel we should stand for more. It's not all the responsibility of business, clearly, government, media, etc. But I think the private sector has a massive part to play in creating and enabling a fair and just society for everyone. And I just worry that if I could change one thing, I think it'd be that the bigger businesses should be measured much more and should be held to account much more on what they do other than just make money for shareholders. Yeah. ESG is playing a part in that. Call it ESG, CSR. I'm not bothered for the terms particularly, but just having a conscience and doing more than just making money. I think, particularly at that level, I think, where you're at most risk of that not happening because of investors, shareholders, etc. I think if we could change that part of the business community, we'd all be better off.
Great. Gavin, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that hour chat with Gavin. I certainly did. There was a couple of big takeaways for me from that conversation. The first is that in any sort of succession planning or any time where the business is looking to change generations, patience is absolutely key. You'll have heard Gavin say a number of times the word incremental and how things just happen slowly and develop. And I think that's a really strong message that comes from Gavin's story, and patience really underlines the passing of the baton from his father to himself in terms of the ownership of Howarth. I think the other major thing that comes through from Gavin is just the respect that he holds for his parents and the journey that they've been on. And whilst he might have been impatient at times, that respect for his mum and dad just shone through and made that he could be patient and still ultimately get what he wanted out of the business and ultimately taking on the ownership. The last thing that I think will always be an item that I remember is just the strength that they have as a family unit. And it shone through and really was a steer for discussions as they talked about succession. And probably most impressively, that they were never going to put in jeopardy the relationship of the family above anything that happened in the business. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I hope you enjoyed the listen, and I look forward to catching you with you next time. Cheers.